Hello and welcome to another edition of the Same Old Stripes podcast. This time we're coming to you with a very good picture of where the Cincinnati Bengals are going to stand in 2023 because we're talking to you after the 2023 NFL Draft, where the Bengals added 8 new faces to the team. Starting off with Myles Murphy in the first round at number 28, which has a lot of Bengals fans pretty excited, but plenty still wondering about whether or not they should have gone for Michael Mayer. Adding corner, adding a maybe potential running back to take over the throne from Joe Mixon. Tyler Boyd could be out of a job here in short order. Lots to unpack with this draft, and I can't think of a better duo to do it with. Tio and Billy, we got the whole gang together today, folks. Tio's in Wisconsin, Billy's in New York. Tio, let's check in with you first, man. How are things? How are you? How's life? How was your draft weekend?
Yeah, life's good, man. Draft was good. I think we were supposed to do a live show on day 2, but we all kind of, forgot. Whatever. It's not a big deal.
We didn't even tease that, which made me happy because I definitely forgot. Like the middle of day 2, I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, we got to about round 3, and I was like, oh yeah, that was supposed to happen. Whatever. I'm doing all right, man. I'm watching some NBA playoffs. My Suns are kind of struggling with the Nuggets, which to be expected when you have no depth. But my second team, the Warriors, the GOAT, Steph Curry, is going to show LeBron what's up. So I'm doing all right.
We got that going for you.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Paul goes down. Not good time in Suns land. But Billy, it looks like it's a sunny day in New York. How are you, man? How's life and how was your draft weekend?
It's good. It was a washout here all weekend. It's first sun we've gotten in like 3 or 4 days here. But it's good, man. I coached a lot over the weekend, so followed a lot for you guys. But kind of like you said, Willie, I think could have gone a couple other ways, but I think they put their foot in the sand and they drew the line in the sand of where they think this team is, where it's going, and I think that's the biggest thing. The worst thing I think you want in a draft is you get a couple picks in one direction, a couple in the other, and you don't really have a direction where you're going afterwards. I think the direction's pretty clear. I think the writing's on the wall for hopefully a pen to paper before we kick off in September for number 9, and I think it's lock and load. Let's ready to go.
Yeah. So for the most part, that's going to wrap up the acquisition and transaction portion of the offseason. We'll still have UDFAs. We'll probably still have a handful of free agent signings ahead of camp, but the draft is come and gone now, folks. We can go ahead and run through these names really fast just so we're all on the same page with the guys we're talking about as I get an ad on the page where I have the draft loaded. Great radio today. So the Bengals at 28 pick Myles Murphy, second edge out of Clemson. Second round pick 60 is going to be DJ Turner of Michigan. Third round is going to be safety Jordan Battle of Alabama. They actually traded back a few spots with the Chiefs and pick up the last pick of the 6th round, which sets up for something very interesting that comes later. 4th round, Charlie Jones, wide receiver of Purdue. 5th round is Chase Brown. 5th round, Chase Brown, downtown Chase Brown. We're going to have a lot of nicknames with Chase Brown. It's coming, baby. Round 6, Andre Yashovich, which is a name we're all going to have to learn how to pronounce, wide receiver out of Princeton. And then another pick in the 6th round from the Chiefs, punter. Interesting things with the punter. Brad Robbins of Michigan, going to set up an Ohio State-Michigan punter battle. And we're going to talk about how Brad Robbins is probably going to go ahead and win that punter battle. You would have to imagine they didn't use draft capital on a punter with great hang time not to keep it. And then they wrapped up things with DJ Ivey, who's a slot corner out of Miami, or at least that's how he projects. That's your draft class, fellas. We can go a lot of different directions with this draft class, and we will. Don't you worry. But let's start with where the Bengals started. And I think we should go ahead and start talking about Myles Murphy at 28. I think that the big thing for a lot of Bengals fans and the story for a lot of Bengals fans is that they passed on the other Michael Mayer, which I don't know about you guys, but I was sitting there waiting. I really thought Michael Mayer's name was going to come off the board. And I was actually pleasantly surprised to hear Myles Murphy's name get called. Adding, length and get off to the defensive line Length is something that they're kind of in short supply on the right side with. Joseph Osai is not a very long defender. Trey Hendrickson's not a very long defender. That leverage against those really long-armed offensive tackle is huge. So that's a little something to add to the mix. But I guess we can kind of examine the players that were on the board and kind of talk about this pick and, kind of where we stand with it. But so I'm letting it be known that I really like it. I think that Myles Murphy is a really exciting player. Not a ton of sacks at Clemson, but a lot of tackles for loss. He is going to bring a lot of relentlessness. I think the thing that he's going to have to add is the pass rush package. He's a little too one-dimensional, one move right now, but it can be taught. And I'll give an example later. But the names that are on the board when the Bengals pick, Michael Mayer, like I mentioned, Nolan Smith, Joey Porter Jr., and Sam Laporta. Based on some commentary from Joe Goodberry, I think is who was talking about this. The final decision from the Bengals came down to Myles Murphy, Brian Brzee, and Nolan Smith. So Michael Mayer didn't even really seem to be in consideration for them with the board at that point. Tio, I'll let you kind of open with this. How do you feel about this pick? And, just kind of give me your reaction to Myles Murphy being the decision at 28.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he was someone that me, you, and Billy haven't really discussed much.
Mainly supposed to be there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think he was going to be there, so why waste your breath? But I mean, that's what makes the draft fun is you just never know who's going to be there. I'm cool with Myles Murphy, man. I think I've been on the train of Mike Mayer. He was never that high on my list, I guess. I just didn't see, the speed that I want in a tight end. Would have been a great pick. I was expecting Michael Mayer. I actually had my hopes up for him at that point when the Bengals came on. And when they selected Myles, I was completely shocked, so I didn't really cheer or boo. I just didn't, I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh, wow, that was unexpected. So I'm cool with the pick, man. If they could redo it, maybe I would consider a trade down at that spot. But it seems like Myles was a pretty hot commodity at that spot. It seemed like a lot of teams really wanted him. So I'm cool with Myles, man. If he develops another pass rush move, that could be a guy that could really, set you up for future years.
Yeah. One thing you said there that I think is interesting before I kind of transition to Billy and let him unpack. It does kind of feel like the Bengals might have stolen Myles Murphy from the Chiefs, which, the Chiefs stole George Karlaftis right in front of the Bengals last year. But seeing the way the next two picks fall, it goes Brian Brzee, who the Chiefs probably would not have been on no matter what. And then it goes Felix Anudike-Uzomah, another edge rusher out of Kansas State, who's kind of like the light version of Myles Murphy in this draft class. Not to knock Anudike-Uzomah, but I think for a long time he was more of a projected early second-round pick. The Chiefs felt like they had to get their edge rusher there. I mean, the Bengals took Myles Murphy right out from under him. I can't confirm the Chiefs, definitely want Myles Murphy, but to me, I think that's an interesting factor and an important factor in this whole thing. Billy, not to get totally off topic, give me your kind of overall reaction. I think Tio and I are both kind of fired up. What it kind of sets up the future.
Yeah, I kind of take the take of, I know we talked a lot about in our show trying to not go down the rabbit hole of 28, as a lot of Twitter and some of the fan base was. But I think the writing's been on the wall since 2020 with this team. They don't value the position of tight end. They haven't. They don't. I don't think they will going forward. Not saying that Irv Smith isn't a huge pickup, because I think he is. You obviously need a body there. You don't want to get caught in a situation where you don't have anybody, or you get into a situation where you're kind of searching at the deadline. But I like it. I think I like to tee the pick up a little bit with Zach Carter. I think it's a little bit of two things, of them being a little bit disappointed in Zach Carter in the first year performance, on top of them kind of thinking that this may be able to something that kind of pushes him through. And I think you have to look at Trey Hendrickson as well. Obviously, with the great years he's had, the first two here, he's had the injury concerns. He's had the injury problems. So I think, obviously, he's not the pass rusher that you're kind of expecting at a first-round DN pick. But he kind of gives you a similar skill set to Sammy, where if Trey goes down for a couple of weeks, he's kind of a plug-and-play guy. And I mean, let's be honest. Like we lost probably 2 of our top 4 or 5 defensive players in Von and Jesse, and I think the entire 3-day period, the team showed that. Like, I think if anything, it showed how much they valued Von and Jesse for them to go. I think it was, am I wrong? 5 of the 8 picks, or 4 of 5 of the 8 picks, right? With we're defensive side, we take out the punter, and the receivers and the running back. Maybe we're 4-4, but their first 3-round picks being on the defensive side of the ball is huge. And I think that was the emphasis. I kind of got that after, the 2nd-round pick as well, which I know we'll touch on, which I like a lot. But I think that's what it is. The writings were on the wall. They've talked about it. They've talked about how much Jesse and Von meant to this team. But the transition of where this team is, of Joe going into that last year, that rookie deal is, listen, you got to get him signed long-term, obviously. They're going to get T and Jamar signed long-term as the writing's on the wall. And, I think the writing's kind of on the wall a little bit for TB and his future here. But, they don't value certain positions, and that's fine. You can't value all 22 positions out there. Like, if you do, you kind of get yourself in a rut of some of these teams where, like we talk about Carolina and Atlanta, where they have so much money, you're kind of just spending aimlessly, right? You got to have a way to play, and I think the cornerstones of this franchise are here with 9, 1, and 85 going to be 5. So there's no way around that, and that's who you build the team around.
Yeah, hey, I think you touched on a really good point there, Billy. And before we even touch on DJ Turner or Battle, I think the writing is on the wall. I think this draft kind of told you what their plan is with the big 3. And, I see the win total for the Bengals is 11.5 over under. If 9, 5, and 1 stay healthy, come on, bro. I don't care what they do. That's why I wasn't mad about this draft, no matter what direction they went. It's like, if I have those 3 guys on offense, I'm feeling good.
Absolutely.
I mean, one more thing, like with the whole Mayer thing and the whole tight end position in general, I think we discussed it all year with Hayden. Like, I thought Hayden was better than TJ, but like we talked about a few weeks ago, you look at the end of the year season numbers, he had 3 freaking touchdowns. Like, he was more consistent. I thought he was there and available and made some bigger plays than CJ did over the year. But like, if we take Michael Mayer at 28, like, let's be completely honest. Like, what is his measure? Like, what are we measuring his success at? Because he's not catching more than 6 or 7 touchdowns unless they're like red zone stalled, which I don't see happening with the schedule they have. And like, he's not going to get the touches as a 1st-round tight end probably should get. So like, I think again, it goes back to like the value aspect of it, and them kind of putting their foot in the ground and saying, this is our big 3. We're riding with this 3. Like, I mean, am I wrong to think that like tight end was never on the board all weekend for them? I personally don't think so.
So tight end, we'll get into tight end later, but tight end was definitely on the board for them, but they just never felt like they had to reach for one. And if you look at where the tight ends were drafted in this class, there was a lot of reaching going on. And I think that's such a frustrating thing that happened for the Bengals a little bit. I don't think they were that frustrated. I don't think that they felt as married to it as maybe Bengals fans did. But tight end was on their board. It absolutely was. They just didn't see the value the same way a lot of these teams do.
It kind of sounds like if Laporta was there at 60, they would have definitely pulled the trigger. It seems like
I think that if Dalton Kincaid was there at 28,
I agree with that. I agree
trigger on Dalton Kincaid.
It almost feels like Laporta might have been higher than Mayer on their board.
I think he was. Like, I would not be surprised. I think the limited athletic ceiling on Mayer always had them a little scared. I think when the testing numbers came back, they were hoping it showed more than what it showed on film, and that they would be pleasantly surprised. And Mayer didn't perform all that spectacular. He performed better than any of us would have, or most of the human population would. Compared to NFL tight ends, when you get in the 1st round, it didn't stand up. I don't know. So I think are we good on this first? Are we good here?
Good.
Okay. Yeah. One thing on the Kincaid thing too, I see a lot of Bengals fans saying like, the Bills jumped the Bengals to go get Kincaid. It was never about the Bengals and Kincaid. It was about them getting ahead of Dallas. Like Dallas was the one.
Dallas would have taken Dalton Kincaid.
So I don't know that argument. That argument makes me laugh. The Bengals were never going to trade up in that first round, I don't think. But yeah, I think if Kincaid was there at 28, that would have been the pick.
Yeah, I think the Cowboys had spent the entire last week before the draft putting out smoke that they would draft Mayer at 26 because they wanted to draft Dalton Kincaid. So these teams like Dalton Kincaid way more. Honestly, I think that a lot of GMs were surprised when Dalton Kincaid didn't go inside the top 20. I don't think the Bills thought he would be there at all, so I don't think they were going to miss an opportunity. We don't need to talk about Dalton Kincaid. He's a Buffalo Bill. I think that the next pick that we should talk about, and we can potentially talk about DJ Turner as part of this, or we can talk about DJ Turner later, but I think the selection of Jordan Battle is the next place we should go. It stays on the defensive side of the ball, which I think for a lot of Bengals fans was, it goes with part of the surprise. I think that a lot of people would have expected offensive tackle there, would have expected tight end, maybe even running back. Names people like Roshan Johnson sitting there. I can't think of the tight end. Tucker Kraft, I think, was sitting there maybe. I can't remember. But there was a couple tight ends there that Bengals fans definitely liked. The Bengals at 95 moved back a little bit. Go with Jordan Battle at safety, a position that wasn't really on many Bengals fans' boards. But if you looked at analyst boards, it was all over the place. Like it was, you couldn't, look at a Daniel Jeremiah needs list, or you couldn't go on any of these databases and find them feeling real good about where the Bengals are at safety. So that's what they are. They drafted Jordan Battle at 95, and they would have taken him at 60. That's what it sounds like. It sounded like they would have taken him at 60 if they didn't feel like they had to get a corner then. The way the board was going, they felt like they had to get a corner. And it worked out in their favor. I think they were surprised when Jordan Battle got to them at the end of the round. They knew the teams in front of them wouldn't be taking him given their needs and the way the draft had fallen. And, this is a guy that's been the highest graded safety in college football since 2020. He was one of 3 captains at Alabama last year. It was him, Will Anderson, and Bryce Young. Bryce Young and Will Anderson, the number 1 and number 3 overall pick in the NFL draft. So that it tells you what kind of leader Jordan Battle is. That's what you need to know. A guy who is revered for being always wanted to be on special teams, a guy that Nick Saban had to fight to get off the field a lot of the time after practice. To me, and I think this is maybe a bold take, I think that it's hard to, discount him as maybe winning this starting job immediately. And Billy, I know this is a pick that you love and maybe something we'll talk about when we talk about our favorite picks later, but, how do you judge this pick? I mean, do you think that Nick Scott's job is safe to start the season? And I'll just let you unpack this Jordan Battle pick.
Yeah, I personally do. I think Nick Scott starts the year. I do see the concerns that you guys have, especially T.O. with him. But I think it's a huge depth pick. A guy who I think was a little undervalued. Like you said, I think the Bengals were ready to take him at 60. I wouldn't have liked him at 60. I like the weight there. But again, I think it speaks to the value that, those 2 guys had, obviously in the back of Von and Jesse. And I hate to say it, also the value that Eli Apple had for them. To go to a corner at 60, I don't think we all really saw it, but I like the pick a lot. I think there's some upside there for sure, but you want to just continue to build the room. And I think the key word we always talk about with Lou, and that you heard in those first 3 press conferences he had, is this versatility, right? Guys that can play multiple positions, guys that can do multiple things. And I think you got that in the first 3 rounds. And, I'm sure there was some, conversation over offensive picks. Obviously, there's some juicy names that could have come off at tight end or running back in the first 3 rounds where I think, would have been a little bit sexier for us and the fan base. But I do think these are 3 picks that you'll see immediate dividend. And I think Jordan Battle has a good chance to come in and compete right away. I do think Nick Scott holds down the job to start the year. But I mean, is there anything wrong with having a safety battle going into camp? I don't see it. I don't see anything wrong with it, and I think the competition is really healthy for the group and for the room because, if you look going into training camp, there's going to be a lot of competition all over the room, whether it's cornerback room, linebacker room. We got legit front 7 and front 8 guys that are going to be competing for that defensive line. get a lot of things moving in preseason that we haven't had in the last couple of years. So it's going to be a fun offseason, I feel like, for us to kind of evaluate some of these preseason games and training camp of this defensive side.
Yeah, especially I like the way you set that up. The defensive side in particular is going to be pretty damn interesting. I mean, if you look at the two deep for this Bengals roster, this Bengals defense right now, there's not a whole lot of gaps. I think everywhere except for 3 technique. If you don't trust Zach Carter 100%, you're pretty deep. You have someone that can step in and you feel comfortable starting or playing extended snaps, and that's a great place to be. As it relates to Jordan Battle, I mean, it's going to create a really crowded safety room. I mean, right now your projected starters are probably still Dax Hill and Nick Scott, but you traded up last year to draft Tyson Anderson, so you've invested some draft capital into him. Michael Thomas is a guy that you love on special teams and a guy that is probably going to make the roster or stick around the practice squad and still end up getting a lot of snaps. Jordan Battle is a guy that he'll play a lot on special teams no matter what. And I think he'll be a guy that's hard to keep off the field, even if it's, different roles that they have him in early before he, maybe takes over, starting safety, starting the box. Man, I feel like I'm even forgetting the safety right now, but I think that just kind of speaks to the depth of this team. Tio, I'm curious about your thoughts on this pick. I think that initially you and I were both a little taken aback, but I know I've really, come to like it. I think that once I understood a little bit more about Jordan Battle, the person and the player, it kind of became a no-brainer to me. But I'd love to hear your evaluation now that you've had time to, work through this draft over the last couple of days.
Yeah, so that's why we don't record right after picks happen, right? Because, initially we're so shocked because you have your mindset on, a particular guy or a particular set of guys. Like we like AA, we like Darnell Washington, DeJuan Jones, that group. We made a list about 5 guys that were like, we need these guys, one of these 5, and we're good. And then they give you a guy that you didn't really, think about. Especially safety, most of Bengal land was not thinking about safety. I had texted you guys earlier in that day, and I said J.R. Brown would be a very interesting pick here. Obviously, he went earlier. So I mean, I thought safety was a pretty big need. You guys know how, maybe not how I feel about Nick Scott, but what he does, I guess, for that safety.
Yeah,
it doesn't enhance it enough to my liking. So I always kind of pegged safety as a need. I just didn't feel like it was really on the Bengals' radar, so I didn't put much time into it. But I think it's a huge get. It's turned out to be one of my favorite picks of this draft. I think he starts right away. I don't think there's going to be much of a competition. To me, it's kind of brain fumbling, I guess, why people would just assume that Nick Scott's going to be the starter. Both new into the system. Nick Scott is a 1-year starter. Go look at the Rams defense on last year. Tell me why that guy was starting. It's because they had nobody else, right? And that's not a shot at Nick Scott, man. I mean, he's how old is he? 28 now?
Yeah, he's earned it.
Yeah, he's earned it, right? There's a reason why
7th round pick.
Right. So I mean right, he's a worker. Yeah. That's great. That's great to hear. But there's a reason he didn't start until he's 27, right? I think it's just going to be on an even playing field. Both are coming in. Battle has a ton of snaps at safety, man. A ton of snaps. So he's not your typical rookie coming in, going to be confused, right? He's played under Nick Saban for a very long time, gotten a lot of snaps. I think he's going to run away with the competition. I don't think it's going to be close. I think you're going to see the talent level right away. But I do think Nick Scott's going to be a very good third safety. And, the most important part about the Bengals safeties is versatility, man. I think Lou had a complete plan going into this offseason after he didn't get the job right at Arizona, that with Bates and Bell, it was so like on pen and paper, right? Your deep safety was Bates. Your kind of closer to line of scrimmage guy was Bell. Teams aren't going to know what we're doing now, right? So that's what's interesting. But yeah, I think he's going to make one of the biggest impacts this year as a rookie.
Man, the more I think about just Jordan Battle player, I just have a hard time seeing him lose that job. Clearly, they thought they needed. The thing that comes back to me is they needed a safety in their minds, and I think that's fascinating because I don't think any of us saw them. They didn't seem like they were sweating for a safety. The way they worried about it in free agency, they felt pretty comfortable waiting around and seeing how things played out, and ended up with Nick Scott on a very favorable deal, a deal that they have no money in after year one. That's guaranteed, so they can get out of it. It's just fascinating to me. I thought that pick I spent the most time thinking about, and the third round has been good for them. Sam Hubbard came out of the third round. That's where they've found leaders in the past. Logan Wilson came out of the third round. Tio, I think you just mouthed Jermaine Pratt came out of the third round.
Jesse came out of the third round.
Jesse was late second, I think.
Was he late second or third?
Yeah. But yeah, it's been a pretty good spot for them, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So lots of very fascinating to me.
Joseph Osai too, right?
Yeah, Joseph Osai, another third round pick, a guy that we never thought was going to be there either.
Yep, that dude's going to get 10 sacks this year, by the way.
Oh, yeah. And I love that they're going to keep all these guys fresh. Well, we have so much to talk about as we get into the season now. I think this draft made for such a good conversation for the rest of the summer. Billy, that's a good point from earlier. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like we have so many topics. There's so many position battles. Moving on to the next position that kind of upsets the apple cart a little bit. Another fascinating pick for a number of reasons was Chase Brown, running back out of Illinois. And here's why it's fascinating. Chase Brown had 1,600 rushing yards last season in Illinois. He's been running into the ground a little bit. He's 25. He's played a ton of snaps, especially last year. I think he had 317 rushing attempts, which is ample. Fascinating. I also think he was second to Bijan. Yeah, he is second to Bijan Robinson with 83 forced tackles forced. That's the stat. Missed tackles forced. That's an area where Joe Mixon's been, had some issues in the past, but I think the reason it's so fascinating to me is that Chase Brown is like a first and second down running back. He is not Samaje Perine. He can pass protect better than Joe Mixon, at least on the college tape. Joe Mixon was actually a decent pass blocker in college, so I don't know what's happened in the NFL. But Chase Brown, him and his brother Sidney, who, by the way, was the number 2 safety on the Bengals board behind Jordan Battle, just fun little note. Both incredible, gym rat work ethic kind of guys, both super dedicated. Worth noting that Joe Mixon has reportedly by Paul Andrew Jr. been offered a pay cut. It's not like an optional, like, hey, it'd be great if you did. It's like a pay cut or go on kind of thing. And Chase Brown, not a spring chicken. It wouldn't surprise another guy that we could see start on day one that we probably wouldn't project on this podcast to start on day one as of now. Tio, I know that you really like Chase Brown as one of the running backs in this draft class. Your thoughts on his role in 2023 and just the pick in general?
Yeah, I like Chase Brown. It's actually kind of funny. I think it was Blake Meek posted on Twitter, I don't know, a couple months ago, and he was going through the running backs list, and he kind of listed Chase Brown, and I was like, yeah, man, Chase Brown's good, but the Bengals will never take him, right? He has too many carries, too much workload, blah, blah. I was like, it just doesn't fit what the Bengals typically take in a running back. They usually target a guy that split carries in college, a guy that doesn't have a huge workload, and on the younger side. So, I really had my heart set on Rashad Johnson, and that's still who I really would have went for if I was the Bengals, mainly because I think that guy can be a true workhorse, a 3-down back. I would have traded up for him, but they didn't. I think the next best thing was Chase Brown. I like it, man. I think it's a good pick. I think he's going to give you a little bit of explosion, and I think he's going to make people want more of him. I will say that. I'm not going to tear down anyone else, but I think you're going to see pretty early on. You're going to be like, wow, that guy gives us something that we haven't had, and that's just runs of 15+ yards, and that's what this offense needs, man. If we want to get teams out too high, if we want to stop just scoring 20 points, 23 points, and get closer to the 27-30 range, you need an explosive back that scares teams. And yeah, I like Chase Brown, man. Fumbling issue doesn't concern me. I think he'll get that fixed. For most of the tape I've seen of him, he usually does hold it high and tight, which is what you want to see. But a lot of carries in college, man. So. You're on mute. Billy, we can I don't know. That's funny.
Oh, we're still live. We can go. Right? Let's come back in. No, I kind of agree with you too, T.O., on that pick. Like, I don't necessarily love it. I don't hate it. It just gives me a little bit of concern that, again, it kind of goes back to like what they wanted, right? They obviously wanted to stack the defensive room early, which they did. But like my biggest concern is it have too much of that like Chris Evans aspect of the pick, where like there's so many variables in it, whether it's his touches, his age, is there a learning curve, the possibility of the fumble issue, like. I mean, it worries me some because I just don't want to get into that aspect where I still don't think that Chris is really ready to kind of take a role on this year.
No.
We really thought he could. But I think the upside and the ceiling is like what I've been saying for a few weeks is Pacheco, like a guy that can kind of come out of the backfield. I think an underrated part of his game is his hands out of the backfield.
Yeah.
I think he'll be able to kind of be in some of these bubble screen actions, and he's. I mean, I think you're better than pass pro than Mix is. It's done sometimes, but I agree with you. I like the pick. A little concerning with some of the measurables and not speed wise or athleticism, just the wear and tear, the age. But I think it's a fire in the mix, but it's also like. I think Mix knows what it is. Like Willie puts it out there that the report of the pay cut, like this isn't a hey, can you? It's hey, you're doing this. Like there's no market for you. There's really no option. You got to get it done. So I'm I like the pick. I think there's upsides and down to it. I don't think he starts right away, but I do think he comes in and plays a role this year. Like he's definitely the second back, I would think, coming into the year.
Yeah, I would assume that as well. I haven't seen that report on Mixon, the Bengals offering him a pay cut or anything, unless it was the report from like 3 weeks ago or whatever. But I think you're right, man. I think the writing is on the wall that, if he was a free agent right now, there's not going to be a lot of people knocking, right? Right now,
look at Eckler, right? Like, what's the market for Eckler? They asked for a trade partner. They said, "Go get it." There's no market out there, right?
Right. The market right now for the running backs, the Latavius Murrays that are taking 1 year, vet minimum deals just to continue their playing career. That's what the market is, man, and people see it, man. Mixon's going to be, 27, I believe. He's never really been a fast running back, so I don't know. It is what it is, man. I'm not a Mixon hater, and I think he's awesome for the locker room. And I hope he's on this team next year because
and I mentioned that this weekend too. Like it shows obviously you didn't think they're going to go up and get Bijan, and after that, right? Like you really have concerns. Yeah. Do you want a running back at 28? Like the only time I really saw them like making a move on a higher running back would have been trading up in the second. But again, like I don't think they're. The problem with 28 and with 60 is like there's so much movement to get there, right?
Yeah.
So in general, I didn't think it had it in the cards. But yeah, I think Mix is huge for the locker room. Obviously, he's a huge guy in that room and in that with that team. So I 100% agree that it lights a fire under him. But I mean, what are we gonna do? He's gonna be the starting running back week 1,
and he's going to be the same type of runner he's always been, man. He's going to give you your 4 or 5 against, 6 in the box, which is, less than I guess we're wanting. It is what it is, man. I think Chase Brown's going to give you another aspect where you're wanting a little bit more of him on the field. And I don't know how he'll react to that, man. It'll be interesting to see how Mixon reacts to the pay cut and possibly, a rookie coming in and taking some of his snaps.
Yeah, no, you're 100%. I mean, it's very interesting, but like Willie, as you're back, I was telling Tio, I think the ceiling for me is the Pacheco, where he can kind of develop into a guy that catches the ball in the backfield, can play 3 downs eventually. But I think Tio and I both kind of have these same concerns, right? Tio, that I think the age and the amount of carries and touches just is a worry. Like it screams Chris Evans, Chris Perry to me a little bit, of a guy that you taken a little bit later than those guys, but you have that kind of expectation going in because he puts flashes out there. But there's a lot of outside variables, I think, that definitely, for me at least, worry me if this is like a guy like the next 2 or 3 years that you'll see in Cincinnati.
And to me, I think it is a worry. It's something I've definitely thought about. He's a guy you're going to have to run through in his 4 years here on his rookie contract, or his 4 years here on his rookie contract, and he's cheap, and that'll be the reality. And it'll be interesting to see how that risk-reward pays off. I mean, I think I sent this in the chat at one point, but that's not a guy who's sitting there if he's 22, 20, 22 years old. Not at all. So, I mean,
that's probably RB3 if he's 2 years younger.
Absolutely. I mean, just the production he had at Illinois. I mean, no one really ran on that Michigan defense last year, and he ran all over them. And that's not a very good Illinois offensive line. I know Burt Bielema up there is trying to develop himself a program, but they're not there yet. Illinois football is they were better last year. They're going to be even better this year. But, this is the Fighting Illini podcast. It's not the Big Ten podcast, as we like to do this whole thing. But, yeah, any reaction to that part of it?
Hey, can I jump in real quick? I think you made a great point and something we need to hit on. Chase Brown's going to be here for 4, maybe 5 years. And then guess what? We're going to be looking to replace him. It's not a personal attack on the dude, okay? We might love Chase Brown, but at the end of the day, it's a running back, man. It is what it is. When you have Joe Burrow, you can't pay running backs $10+ million. That's just is what it is.
I like that Tio has given us this opportunity to just put a line in the sand that we're on this now.
Or tight ends.
Yes. So 4 years, when y'all come whining about why aren't they signing Chase Brown, same old Stripes told you first. This was always the plan, baby. This is what this pick was for. And when we don't re-sign the 29-year-old running back, same old Stripes will be there for you. We'll be there to tell you why they didn't do it. We'll pull this clip, and then that'll be that. It'll be a beautiful thing. I want to get to a couple more things before we get out of here. Should we talk about tight end, or you guys want to do favorite picks? We can skip favorite picks and do that another day. Let's talk about tight end, and then let's talk about who's most likely to start. But let's start with tight end. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time here, but they did skip out on the tight end again. As we talked about earlier, the draft didn't really fall the way they wanted it to. They've obviously re-signed Drew Sample, which he fills a backup role. He's a blocker. That's the reality of that situation. But, Billy, I think you're primed and ready to talk tight end. I can just tell. Give me your thoughts on that position group. I mean, how worried are you about that room? It doesn't seem like you're all that concerned. I don't think this podcast is the most concerned on tight end you'll ever see.
No, and I just think it goes back to the play style. I think it goes back to, Joe in college. I mean, let's be completely honest. To call a spade. Thaddeus Moss is tight end 1 in that 2019 team. I mean, he was no Jeremy Shockey at Miami in 2002. Like he can make it. He can make it work with what he's got. Not worried. A coach of a guy who's a diehard Vikings fan. He tells me a lot that, Irv will make the spectacular catch. He'll drop a couple that he should have. Drops are an issue, but it doesn't concern me much, man, to be completely honest. I'm a little bit on you with Sample, man. Let's see a little bit of growth there. Let's see a little bit of Sample on the goal line. Let's see a little bit of the hands being worked. I mean, I don't hate it. I bring back the Cleveland game a couple years ago. I made a couple of catches. But I see, we'll talk a little bit about favorite picks, and one of mine that I think is going to be on this roster that some guys might not see. But it's going to be so spread, man. They're going to be so fast. They're going to play so fast that I don't even think. I think Irv Smith obviously has a similar season, I'd say, to Hayden. But I don't even think Irv Smith is going to be like a blip on our concerns as we go into November, December.
So I think an interesting part of this algorithm too, and I thought about the speed component is kind of where my brain's going with it. They are going to play fast, and the wide receivers they chose, Charlie Jones, I think tested pretty damn well, if I'm not mistaken, or tested pretty 4.43 speed. I think him and Andre Yoshevich both have the same 4.3 speed or 4.43 speed. Clearly, the wide receiver position is more valuable to them than the tight end. They picked Charlie Jones in the 4th round, and to me, that was a statement that that's more what our offense is. And I think that's super interesting in this whole algorithm. They weren't worried about, we need to get a backup tight end or a guy that projects as a backup with maybe the ceiling to be a starter in this spot. Because that's usually what you get in the 4th round. That's what you get in tight end the later you get in the draft. And we do have hits there, but it feels like a lot of the tight ends are going to come in, the first 3 rounds if you're going to hit like a really consistent guy that's going to play starter snaps. I don't know. I think the wide receiver commitment reaffirms my confidence in the tight end thing being something they can kind of make up as they go and find ways to get production out of it. T.O., your thoughts on the tight end thing? That's a good way to say the tight end thing.
The tight end thing. I think that's a perfect way to say it.
Yeah.
Dude, honestly, I just don't think it fell right. The only one I could make an argument for is Darnell Washington, maybe in the 3rd over Battle, right? Now, you're going to have to see him 2 times a year at least. We've all thought Washington's going to be a good tight end in this league eventually, right? Maybe he's not there yet, but he already has the blocking aspect down, and he has the athleticism to be a good receiving tight end. Bengals never saw it. It doesn't even look like he was on their board. Obviously, on him 3 times.
Did you? I don't know. There's a lot of reports about his knee not being good at all.
Yep.
Which I think that might be what took him off the board. I don't think that they were comfortable with a banged up tight end. So I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and I don't know,
but
man.
Nevertheless, he's a good player, and I would not have been pissed if they picked him there.
Right, I wouldn't either. It would have, because he was being mocked really in the 1st round for the longest time. But I was always on the train of, if you're going to get a tight end, man, you need someone with that athletic upside, right? And Mayer never provided that, which is why I don't think the Bengals were in on him. Kincaid provided that, but he also didn't provide the inline stuff. The Bengals kind of need a guy that can do both. That you can line up inline and you don't know what they're doing, right? You line Sample inline, and what are we doing? We're running the ball. So I don't know, man. The tight end it never fell correctly. Even with Kuntz, it's like he's a 6th round guy for a reason. If he hits great, but the odds are the Bengals are ready to win now. And I think we kind of forget that sometimes. And I think the Charlie Jones pick is a win now move. It's getting a ready receiver, an older receiver, which Bengals typically don't do. And I like that move, man. I hated it at the beginning. I had no idea who Charlie Jones was. I texted you boys and I said, "Who the is that?" And you guys caught me up to speed pretty quick, and I appreciate that. But he's a route runner, man. He's Wes Welker. Julian Edelman, any other white guys I can compare him to, let's do it. But yeah, I like it, man. That's a good pick.
Yeah, the Charlie Jones, I'm fired up about him. That's my favorite pick in the draft, just so we're on the same page. I love having that guy. I think the thing that is really interesting about him, he's a great route runner. Brian Callahan said if you ask him to run 12 yards, he runs 12 yards. You ask him to run 15 yards, he's going to run 15 yards. But he also has afterburner, and that's what I love about him. Having him with a little bit of afterburner on it, I think that's really exciting. The rack opportunities, man. He doesn't, break tackles very well, but he has a little breakaway speed to him.
Hey,
Billy, I think you're ready to weigh in.
First downs. Just get first downs. We're good.
Yeah.
I'm here. Before I got to get to practice, I wanted to throw my favorite pick of the draft. I'm going 6th round, man. I love the receiver out of Princeton. If you look at some of the tape, I love it, man. I think he can kind of provide a similar kind of you know, I want to say that over the top threat with size, I think, right? Like, I think he provides something where, like T.O. says, you're going to throw him out on the edge, and it's not going to be completely like, all right, we know what's going to happen here. Like, I really think him and Chase's athleticism, kind of differs in their stature, but similar in their threats deep. I think he just really makes them a lot more versatile at the wide receiver position. I think he makes a team. I know it's probably up for debate with him being a 6th rounder coming in and a lot of battle of that position, but I think I think he comes in and makes a team. I think he's the guy that could, definitely get a couple of touches in. And I know you guys are going to touch on it when I get off, but like TB is my guy. I love him, but I think the kind of writing is on the wall with going receiver 4th and early 6th, where, and something that I don't think the Bengals would have done in previous years. I mean, let's be completely honest. If we're talking about a team who had winning on its mind, which obviously, listen, we didn't have it in 18 and 19. We wanted to get the quarterback. We got the quarterback. But if you look at the receivers they brought in 18, 19, like before T, like it really wasn't, like I love AJ to death, but you knew the slope that AJ was kind of going on. And I think the growth in the Bengals to see where kind of TB's career is going, and not talk about performance, but obviously he's getting older, he's breaking down a little bit more, got hurt in the KC game. I think as you kind of go forward, it's a growth in the organization to say, hey, we're going to get ahead of this, maybe 2 years ahead of the curve of we're going to bring guys in here that are going to just compete. Listen, you never saw them, with that big three of them we had most of new on a couple weeks ago, kind of looking for the future. You didn't really see them bringing guys in that kind of stuck and landed. I think investing in the receiver position in the 4th and 6th round early tells me a lot about where the franchise is as the maturity level of being a franchise that wants to be a contender and kind of where we're going forward. So I'll let you guys follow up on that. Always a pleasure, fellas, and who day?
Who day, brother?
Who day, Billy?
All right, so I'm going to pick up with Andrei Yoshevich for Billy real fast.
Yes, sir.
I do like that pick. The thing that I think is that Billy brought up that I want to hit on, I don't think there's any chance he doesn't make the team for some reason. I think that what he does scream to me is a guy who's not going to play this year. He's going to be, I think, for 17 games. I think maybe not 17, but you'll see him redshirted a lot. And I think that is not a bad thing for a team at this phase. Another thing that I heard out there is this spells doom for T. Higgins. Come on, guys. A 6th round pick is never going to replace T. Higgins in their mind. That's not how they view T. Higgins. I think, if anything, this draft told us, and this is more topics we'll get into later because there's a lot of talk about this draft still, but this is probably an indication that Big Three is staying together. They're not rocking the boat. They're getting cheaper on defense to load up that cash on offense. And Orlando Brown's already been a piece of that. So that's something to equate. T.O., let's wrap up with your favorite pick and or any thoughts you have on Andrei Yoshevich, and then your favorite pick, and then we can get out of here.
Yeah, I think if it spelled the end for T, I think they would have went Jalen Hyatt in the 2nd. With him being there, bigger guy, faster guy, whatever. 6th round pick. Some things Bengals say are funny.
Come on, guys, settle down.
For real. My favorite pick is gonna be DJ Turner. Actually, the reason being is because I think it sets you up for a very long time with Cam Taylor-Britt and DJ Turner, and we saw the success that Cam Taylor-Britt had last year. I think he's really good, man. I think he's sticky, and I think DJ Turner is very sticky. With Lou, I think he's just going to be able to do some stupid things this year, and I think he's going to have the guys to back it up. I don't know if we see a lot of DJ this year. Maybe it's kind of like a Cam Taylor-Britt situation, but our depth is crazy this year. It's not going to be, one guy goes down in that secondary and you're screwed like we had with Cheeto. We always kind of knew at the end of the day it was going to come back and bite us. But what makes me really excited is I forget. I think it might have been Daniel Jeremiah. He said he had inside-out versatility.
Yes.
And that excites me, man. When we play the Chiefs, I don't think there's a way in hell that they allow Mike Hilton to get exposed again in coverage. You already saw it last year where they took him out. They replaced him with Dax Hill a lot in that final game because they're like, dude, they do this to us every single time where they just attack whoever Mike Hilton's guarding. And Mike Hilton, is a very, very good player, and we love him here. And, coverage has never been his calling, right? He's always been a very good tackler, a very good blitzer. So I think all the moves they made, man, scream to me, go beat the Chiefs again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the beat the Chiefs thing is so interesting because we saw the Bills go a little bit different direction. They had an offensive piece. They had Osiris Torrance in the second round as well, in addition to Dalton Kincaid, who we talked about earlier. Osiris Torrance being the guard from Florida by, some people really, depending on what you consider Peter Skoronski, he was considered the number one guard in this class or number two guard in this class. Maybe him and Joe Tippmann are probably in that tier below Peter Skoronski. From there, I mean, the Bengals definitely, this is a beat the Chiefs approach. And I think you're totally right. And I think that inside-out versatility, I hadn't thought about that quite yet, but we talked about that after that AFC Championship game loss. We talked about it at length about the Mike Hilton size thing. And it's going to be a thing that teams are definitely going to attack more. Like, if you're the Bills, that has to be something you're thinking about with your Dalton Kincaid pick. Just seeing the way that, Chiefs are able to spam that. I mean, it's 15 yards whenever they want it in that coverage. So, and the name I'll throw out there that I saw our friend Bengals fans compare DJ Turner-Tooth, I think is really fun. Orlando Scandrick.
Oh, I don't love it.
Yeah. So interesting comp, nevertheless. Orlando Scandrick did have some very good years with Dallas.
He did.
Yeah. But, he did have MDMA thing, and then after the MDMA thing, it kind of wasn't the same. So, yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. We're going to talk a lot more about all of these guys as we continue to talk. We had a lot of time to talk about, or things to talk about before real football starts again. So this is the beginning of our coverage on this Bengals team and this Bengals season, I feel like, and I think we're leaving it in a good place to you. So I think we'll sign off there, and with plenty more to talk about. So that's good. So for everyone at home, for Billy, who's gone, and Tio, who's in Wisconsin, I'm Willie, and Houday.
Houday.
Oh.